A single dad teaches his daughter to ride a bike in a parking lot, just a normal day, filled with scraped knees, laughter, and love. But watching from the shadows is someone no one expected: the store's mysterious owner. He isn't just any store owner, he's a lonely billionaire, hiding a heartache money can't fix. For years he's built empires in silence. But tonight, he sees something that shakes him. A father's love he's never known. And a little girl who reminds him of everything he's lost. When compassion collides with secrets, lives intertwine in ways no one could imagine. Will this billionaire's hidden pain turn into hope, or will his past destroy the fragile bond just beginning to form? What happens when the simplest act of fatherly love awakens a billionaire's buried heart? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The fluorescent lights in Jefferson Elementary's cafeteria hummed like distant helicopters, a sound that still made Ethan Cole's shoulders tighten after all these years. He smoothed his blue button-down one more time before stepping through the doorway, Maya's small hand warm in his calloused one. "There's seats by the window," Maya whispered, tugging him toward the back corner where fewer parents clustered. But Councilman Brent Wallace had already spotted them, his politician's smile spreading wide as margarine. "Ethan, good to see you could make it." His eyes swept down, pausing at the carefully ironed shirt, the same one from last month's meeting and the month before that. "Love the consistency, friend. Some folks change their look every season, but you? Rock solid." The woman beside Brent Pearl's pressed blazer, the works leaned into her neighbor. Their whispers carried just enough to reach Ethan's ears. Something about priorities and poor Maya. Ethan's jaw locked. Muscle memory from 1,000 inspections, 1,000 moments of standing at attention while someone found fault. His thumb found the spot on his left cuff where he'd darned a tear with thread that almost matched. Almost. Maya's fingers slipped from his grasp. She slumped into a plastic chair, her sketchbook clutched against her chest like armor, eyes fixed on the linoleum. "Let's get started, shall we?" Brent commanded the room with practiced ease, launching into budget concerns and fundraising quotas. His voice carried that particular tone, helpful on the surface, sharp underneath, that made every suggestion sound like an accusation. "Now, about the spring gala dress code." Brent's gaze found Ethan again. "We want everyone to feel comfortable, of course. Maybe we could organize a clothing drive beforehand? Help some families prepare?" Heat crawled up Ethan's neck. Around him, heads turned with the slow precision of a firing squad taking aim. The woman with the pearls nodded sympathetically, the kind of sympathy that felt like sandpaper. "Actually, I'd like to discuss Maya Cole's contribution to the spring art showcase." Grace Alvarez rose from her seat near the front, her voice cutting clean through the murmur. She moved to the display board with purpose, pulling down a canvas that made the overhead lights seem warmer somehow. Maya created this piece about community. Grace held up the painting, a patchwork of houses, each one different, their windows glowing gold. "She told me every house has its own light inside, no matter what it looks like from the street. I think we could all learn from that perspective." Maya's head lifted slightly. A few parents murmured appreciation. Even Pearl Woman seemed momentarily disarmed. "Beautiful work, Maya," someone called out. Brent's smile tightened. "Lovely. Now, back to the gala." The meeting dragged on for another 40 minutes, each agenda item another small cut. Ethan kept his hands flat on his thighs, posture perfect, giving them nothing. Maya sketched furiously in her notebook, her pencil scratching out something he couldn't see. When it finally ended, Ethan waited for the crowd to thin before standing. No need to navigate the clusters of parents comparing vacation plans and SAT tutors. "Dad, can we go?" Maya's voice came out small. "Roger that, kiddo." They made it 3 steps from the building when Grace's voice caught them. "Mr. Cole?" She stood beside a battered Honda, fumbling with her keys in the amber parking lot light. Not rushing toward them, not making a scene. Just there. Ethan stopped, squaring his shoulders again. "Ms. Alvarez." I wanted to thank you both for coming tonight. I know these meetings can be. She glanced back at the building where Brent's laugh boomed through an open window. Challenging. It's fine. It's not, actually. Grace took a step closer, lowering her voice. Maya's one of my brightest students. Creative, kind, always helping others. You should be proud. Maya pressed against Ethan's side, hiding a smile. I am, he said simply. Grace nodded, then seemed to wrestle with something. I've been working on an idea, really. Something for families who, well, something to make things easier, more dignified, for everyone. The word dignified hung between them like a bridge. I don't know what you mean, Ethan said carefully. I know. Grace's smile held no pity, just understanding. But when I figure it out completely, would you be open to hearing about it? Not as charity. As community. Ethan studied her face. No condescension there, no savior complex. Just a teacher who saw his daughter's light. Maybe. That's all I'm asking. She unlocked her car, then paused. Maya, bring that painting home safe. It's really special. They watched her drive away, taillights disappearing into the evening. She's nice, Maya said quietly. Yeah. The walk home took 12 minutes. Ethan knew because he'd timed it, calculated the gas saved, the wear on his truck's struggling transmission. Maya stayed quiet until they reached their front steps. Dad, your shirt looks good. He looked down at the blue button-down, saw all its imperfections, its careful repairs. Thanks. Sweetheart. Inside, he set water boiling while Maya spread her homework across the kitchen table. The box of mac and cheese waited on the counter, store brand, 3 for $2. It would fill their stomachs. That was enough, wasn't it? Morning came hard and fast. Ethan's alarm buzzed at 5:15, same as always. Coffee brewing. Lunch packed bologna again, and Maya stumbling into the kitchen at 6:30, with her hair standing in 7 directions. Brush, he said, pointing at the bathroom. Already did. Try again, soldier. She groaned but shuffled back down the hall. Ethan checked her backpack while she wrestled with tangles. Math homework done, reading log signed, lunch money envelope $2.50 exact. He zipped everything tight and set it by the door. Bus in 5, he called out. Maya emerged, looking marginally less wild, grabbed a piece of toast, and shouldered her pack. At the door, she turned back. Love you, Dad. Love you too, kiddo. Learned something good today. The yellow bus swallowed her up at 6:52. Ethan watched until it turned the corner, then headed for his truck. The warehouse started at 7:30 sharp, and Jerry didn't tolerate tardiness, even from veterans who never missed a day. The shift passed in a blur of forklifts and loading docks. Ethan's back ached by noon, his knees by 3. When the whistle finally blew at 4:0, he sat in his truck for a full minute before turning the key. The engine coughed twice before catching. Home by 4:25. Maya wouldn't get off the bus until 4:45. Just enough time to shower off the warehouse dust and start something for dinner. He grabbed her backpack from where he'd left it that morning. No, that wasn't right. The backpack sat on the kitchen table, though he distinctly remembered leaving it by the door. Maya must have come home sick. But the house stood empty, quiet as a held breath. He opened the main compartment to check for a note from the nurse. Instead, he found a folded piece of paper tucked between her spelling workbook and math folder. Not Maya's handwriting, too neat, too careful. His name written on the outside in blue ink. Mr. Cole. The note unfolded in his hands like something fragile. Dear Mr. Cole, I hope you don't mind me writing directly. I asked Maya to put this in her bag this morning, and she promised to keep it private. I wanted to follow up on our brief conversation last night. For months now, I've been developing an idea I call the Dignity Closet. It would be a quiet space at school where families could select clothing and necessities in complete privacy, no forms, no questions, no judgment. Like a personal shopping experience, but free and confidential. I've seen too many children miss opportunities because they're worried about appearances. Too many parents sacrifice their own needs to provide for their kids. This isn't charity, it's community members supporting each other with respect intact. I don't have funding yet. I don't even have official approval. But I believe in this idea, and I believe our school needs it. When I do find support, I'd value your input on making it truly dignified, not patronizing. Thank you for raising such a wonderful daughter. Maya's kindness toward others tells me everything about the values you've taught her. With respect, Grace Alvarez, P.S. Awan. Maya doesn't know about this note. She just thought she was delivering boring teacher papers. Ethan read it twice, then a third time. The words dignified and respect jumped out like flares in the dark. His hands shook slightly as he folded the note. Not from anger. From something harder to name. The front door banged open. "Dad, we saw a hawk catch a mouse at recess." Maya whirlwinded into the kitchen, dumping her backpack, a different one, he now realized, her back up onto a chair. "That's something," he managed. "Homework? Just reading. Can I draw first?" 20 minutes. Then homework. She settled at the table with her sketch pad while Ethan started dinner. Spaghetti tonight, with sauce from a jar stretched thin with water and garlic powder. His mother would have been appalled, but his mother never had to make $5 feed 2 people for 3 days. After supper, Maya chattering about the hawk, the art teacher's new haircut, everything but the note. They settled into evening routines. Maya read on the couch. Ethan sat in his chair with his sewing kit, a button from the warehouse lost and found box, and his blue shirt. The button didn't quite match the others. Slightly more gray than blue, a hair smaller. But it would hold. He threaded the needle with practiced ease, muscle memory from field repairs on uniforms, on gear, on things that mattered more than shirts. "Dad?" Maya looked up from her book. "Why do you always fix that shirt?" His needle paused mid-stitch. "Because it's perfectly good. No sense wasting something that still works. But you could get a new one." "Could I?" She frowned, considering. "From the store?" "Things cost money, sweetheart." "I know." She chewed her lip. That same expression she got when working through a hard math problem. "Ms. Alvarez says sometimes people help each other. That's what makes a community." The needle slipped, pricking his thumb. A tiny bead of blood welled up. "She says a lot of things. She's smart." "That she is." Maya returned to her book. Ethan finished the button, tied it off, cut the thread. The shirt looked almost presentable, almost like it belonged in those PTA meetings where fathers discussed golf handicaps and vacation homes. Almost. Grace's note sat folded in his pocket. Dignity, closet. The name itself felt like a contradiction. How could charity ever be dignified? How could need be anything but shameful? But then he thought about Maya, shrinking in her chair while Brent Wallace made his pointed jokes. Thought about Grace standing up, redirecting the room's attention with the smooth precision of someone who'd done it before. Not charity, community. The button held firm when he tugged it. Good enough for another few months, maybe longer if he was careful. Pride was just another thing he couldn't afford to keep. The Lincoln Town car looked absurd, parked outside Jefferson Elementary, black, gleaming, with tinted windows dark enough to hide secrets. It sat among the minivans and pickup trucks like a panther in a petting zoo. Lena Alvarez stepped out wearing sunglasses that cost more than most people's rent. Her heels clicked against the cracked sidewalk with the precision of a metronome. The driver stayed behind the wheel, engine running. "Visiting my niece's class," she told the secretary, sliding her visitor's badge into a Hermes bag. The secretary's eyes widened at the designer leather, but Lena had already moved past the desk. Grace's classroom smelled like crayons and hand sanitizer. 22 third graders sat in clusters, working on science projects about local birds. Grace stood at the back table, helping a boy glue feathers onto cardboard wings. Aunt Lena! Not her niece. Grace didn't have children, but Maya Cole, waving from her desk. The girl's face lit up with the pure joy of recognition. Lena's cover story crumbled instantly. "Maya, honey, I think you're confused," Grace started. "No, she's right." Lena pulled off her sunglasses. "I'm everyone's aunt today. Mind if I help with the birds?" For the next hour, Lena Alvarez, whose face graced magazine covers from Milan to Tokyo, sat cross-legged on a elementary school floor, teaching 8-year-olds the difference between tail feathers and flight feathers. Her designer dress picked up glue spots. She didn't seem to notice. When the dismissal bell rang, parents flooded the pickup zone. Lena stood by the window, watching the choreographed chaos of families reuniting. "That one." Grace pointed to a tall man in work boots and a faded army jacket. "That's Ethan Cole." Ethan moved through the crowd with military efficiency, scanning for Maya. When he spotted her, his weathered face softened into something that made Lena's chest tighten unexpectedly. Maya ran to him, chattering about hawks and feathers and the fancy lady who knew about birds. Ethan listened with complete attention, one hand gentle on her shoulder, guiding her toward their aging Ford pickup. But it was his shirt that caught Lena's eye. Blue Oxford, pressed with care. The collar showed wear, but the stitching, the stitching. Each mend was perfect, almost invisible, unless you knew fabric. Unless you'd spent 20 years building an empire on understanding how thread and cloth could tell stories. "He did that himself," she murmured. Grace looked over. "Did what?" "The repairs on his shirt. That's not machine work. That's hand-stitching by someone who learned to make things last." The pickup pulled away, Maya's small hand waving from the passenger window. That evening, Grace's apartment felt even smaller with Lena in it. Her sister sat at the kitchen table, looking like a magazine shoot had accidentally wandered into real life. The overhead light caught the subtle highlights in her professionally maintained hair. "Tell me about him." Lena wrapped her manicured fingers around a chipped coffee mug. "Ethan?" Grace poured herself tea, buying time. "Why?" "Because I've seen $1,000 shirts with worse tailoring than his repairs." Grace sat down, studying her sister's face. Behind the perfect makeup, something flickered. Interest? Recognition? "He's a veteran. Lost his wife 3 years ago, cancer. Works at the warehouse when they have shifts. Picks up construction jobs when they don't. Never misses a school event. Never complains. Never asks for help. Pride." "Dignity," Grace corrected. "There's a difference." Lena traced the rim of her mug. "Is there?" "Pride pushes people away. Dignity just tries to stand tall. Ethan's not pushing anyone, he just doesn't know how to bend without breaking. And Maya? Brilliant, creative, draws constantly, sees everything." Grace smiled. "She asked me once if her dad was tired because his shirt looked tired. She notices when kids whisper about them." Lena stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, the street light flickered, casting shadows that danced between broken and whole. "That idea you mentioned on the phone, the dignity closet. It's just a dream. No funding, no space, no 'I'll fund it.'" Grace's tea stopped halfway to her lips. "Lena, anonymously, completely anonymous. But there are conditions." Of course there were. Lena Alvarez didn't give anything without ensuring it was done right. "I want local seamstresses involved. Alterations, repairs, custom fitting. This isn't about handing out clothes, it's about making people feel seen, valued." She turned from the window. "And I want it to feel like it came from the community, not from above." "Why?" Grace set down her mug. "Why do you care? You haven't been home in 2 years." "You haven't." "Because I built an empire on making people feel inadequate." The words came out sharp, bitter. "Lena tells women they need the right dress, the right bag, the right everything to matter. And today I watched a man who owns one good shirt treat it like treasure. He knows something I forgot." "Which is?" "That value isn't about labels or price tags." Lena's voice dropped. "It's about the hands that hold things together." Grace reached across the table. caught her sister's perfectly manicured hand. "We can do this right. Make it meaningful. Find your seamstresses. I'll wire the money tomorrow." "But Grace?" Lena squeezed back. "That man Ethan, he can't know it's from me. Promise me." "Why?" "Because dignity can't be bought. It has to be honored." Outside, the streetlight finally steadied, casting clean light onto empty pavement. The construction paper crinkled under Maya's careful hands as she smoothed her display board against the classroom wall. Around her, 20 other fourth graders arranged their open house projects: volcanoes made of papier-mâché, family trees drawn in crayon, collections of pressed leaves. "Maya, that's beautiful," Grace said, kneeling beside her. The photo at the center showed Ethan from behind, morning light catching the precise stitches along his shirt's shoulder seam. Maya had taken it last Sunday without him knowing, when he'd been fixing their porch step. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing forearms marked by work and weather. "My hero's shirt," Maya had written in purple marker above the photo. Below, in her neat printing, "My dad fixes everything, even clothes. He says good things deserve to last." Tommy Chen leaned over from his volcano. "Your dad looks cool." "He is cool," Maya said firmly. By lunch, all the displays lined the main hallway. Parents would see them tomorrow night during open house. Grace watched Maya skip away to recess, her ponytail bouncing, and felt a familiar tightness in her throat. These kids carried so much. Mrs. Patterson arrived early for afternoon pickup, her designer heels clicking on linoleum. She paused at Maya's display, tilting her head. Grace saw her pull out her phone. "Excuse me," Grace started, but Mrs. Patterson was already typing. "This is lovely," she murmured, not looking up. Simply lovely. The post went live at 3:47 p.m. By 4:15, it had 30 shares. By dinner, 300. Grace's phone buzzed against her kitchen counter as she stirred pasta sauce. Another notification. Another. "Turn that thing off," Lena said from the couch, but she was scrolling her own phone, eyes wide. "Listen to this comment," Grace read aloud. "My father worked 3 jobs and owned 2 shirts. Seeing this reminds me dignity isn't about having more, it's about honoring what you have." "This one's from Texas," Lena said. "Starting a mending circle at our church because of this post. Thank you for the reminder that careful hands show love." Grace's phone rang. The school's main number. "Miss Alvarez? This is Janet from the front office. We've been getting calls all afternoon. People want to donate clothes, money, even sewing machines. They're all asking for you." Grace sank onto a kitchen stool. "How many calls?" "I stopped counting at 50. After hanging up, Grace stared at Lena. "This wasn't supposed to happen like this." "No," Lena agreed, but her eyes sparked with something Grace recognized from childhood, the look she got when a plan exceeded expectations. "It's better." Across town, Ethan scrolled through his ancient phone while Maya did homework at their kitchen table. He'd finally figured out what everyone at work had been smiling about all day. There it was, his shirt, his back. His daughter's words making strangers cry in comment sections. 2,000 shares, he read quietly. Maya looked up, pencil paused over long division. "Are you mad? Should I be? Some kids take pictures of their dads fishing or at baseball games. I only had you fixing things." Her voice went small. "I wanted them to see you're strong. That you don't give up." Ethan closed the phone, walked around the table, and pulled her into a hug that smelled of pencil shavings and her strawberry shampoo. "I'm not mad, baby girl. Some people might think we're poor. We are poor. But that's not all we are," Maya said into his chest. "Right?" "Right." His phone buzzed. "Unknown number. Mr. Cole? This is Grace Alvarez. I need to speak with you about something wonderful that's happened." 20 minutes later, Ethan stood in Grace's living room, still in his work boots, staring at Lena's laptop screen. The donation tracker showed 47, 0, and climbing. "From one picture?" His voice came out rough. "From one truth, Grace corrected. People see themselves in you. Their fathers, their struggles, their dignity. We can open the dignity closet immediately, Lena added, carefully professional. Playing the part of a distant consultant, Grace had supposedly contacted. Full inventory, professional setup, trained volunteers. Ethan studied her, something flickering in his expression. You're Grace's sister, the one who lives in New York. Yes, you know about clothes. I do. He nodded slowly, processing. This money, it's not charity, is it? It's people wanting to be part of something. Exactly, Grace said, but we need your permission. Maya's photo started this. We won't move forward if you're uncomfortable. Ethan walked to the window, hands in his pockets. Outside, November wind scattered leaves across empty lots. When he turned back, his shoulders had straightened into military posture. 2 conditions. First, we hire local people for any work needed. Second, Maya gets to help design whatever this becomes. She started it, she should see it through. Done, Lena said immediately. Then yes. He looked directly at Grace. Let's show them dignity never goes out of style. That night, Maya fell asleep sketching logos, her colored pencils scattered across her bedspread. Ethan tucked her in, then sat at his kitchen table with needle and thread, reinforcing another worn seam. His phone showed the post at 10,000 shares. Tomorrow, everything would change, but tonight? He'd finish his mending. Ruth Whitaker arrived at 7 Saturday morning with 12 women and enough coffee to fuel an army. These old bones know how to work, she announced, surveying the school basement. Fluorescent lights hummed over concrete floors and water-stained ceiling tiles. But Lord, this needs love. By 8, transformation had begun. Ruth's quilting circle attacked the space with military efficiency, no surprise, since half were veterans' wives. They strung warm Edison bulbs from hooks, draped cream curtains to create private changing areas, and arranged donated racks by size and season. Not there, Doris, Ruth directed, pins between her teeth. Men's interview clothes by the mirror. They need to see themselves becoming who they're meant to be. Lena had arrived at dawn with a rental truck, unloading boxes of hangers, shoe racks, and full-length mirrors. She worked quietly, following Ruth's lead, her designer clothes gradually rumpling as she hauled and sorted. You know about displays, Ruth observed, watching Lena arrange children's coats by color. I know about wanting things to feel special. Good. These families deserve special. By noon, the basement no longer existed. In its place stood something that wouldn't have looked out of place on Main Street, warm lights softening every corner, clothes arranged like possibilities rather than handouts, and a small seating area with Ruth's handmade cushions where children could read while parents browsed. Grace called Ethan at 2. Can you and Maya come by? We need extra hands for the soft launch. They arrived to find controlled chaos. Grace stood with a clipboard, directing traffic. Ruth pressed suits near the men's section. Lena was on her knees, organizing children's shoes by size. Mr. Cole. A woman called out Maria Santos from Maya's class. Could you help my husband? He has an interview Monday, but... She gestured helplessly at her husband, who stood frozen before the rack of blazers. Ethan approached Carlos Santos, recognizing the look pride at war with need. Warehouse work? Ethan asked, noting the man's calloused hands. Distribution center. But they want supervisors now. Need to look the part. Let's see. Ethan pulled out a navy blazer, held it up. Too formal. You want to show you can work with the team and lead them. He selected a brown tweed instead. This says reliable, trustworthy. Try it. Carlos slipped it on. Too big in the shoulders. Wait here. Ethan found another, charcoal gray, simple cut. This one. Perfect fit. Carlos stood straighter, catching his reflection. The shoulders? Ethan adjusted them with practiced hands. Always check the shoulders first. Everything else can be altered, but shoulders have to fit. He stepped back. There. You look like management material. Carlos's eyes went wet. I haven't worn anything this nice since my wedding. You're wearing it to build your family's future. Nothing more important than that." Maria hugged Ethan so hard he stumbled. Word spread. Soon, Ethan had a line of men seeking advice which tie for a bank interview, whether brown shoes worked with navy pants, how to roll sleeves properly for kitchen work. "Military?" asked one young man, watching Ethan's precise movements. "Army. 15 years. Marines. 3 tours." They shook hands, understanding passing between them. "Thanks for this, brother." Maya circulated with a basket of donated scarves, offering them to mothers bundling up children. She watched her father work, memorizing every interaction, how he never touched without asking, how he made each man feel like he was doing Ethan the favor by accepting help. "Your dad's special," Grace said, appearing beside her. "I know." By 5 o'clock, 43 families had visited. Winter coats found children who'd been layering hoodies. Interview clothes found parents with Monday appointments. Sturdy shoes found teenagers who'd been taping soles together. "Look at this," whispered Janet Lou, holding up a small suit. Her 8-year-old son needed it for his piano recital. "It's perfect. He'll feel so proud." Her son Tommy straightened his shoulders in the mirror, adjusting his tie with serious concentration. Near closing, Ethan found himself standing with Grace, watching Ruth teach a teenage girl to hem pants. "You changed lives today," Grace said softly. "We all did. But you showed those men something different, not charity brotherhood." Before Ethan could respond, Lena approached with a camera. "I'd like to document this, with permission. Not faces, just hands helping hands, clothes finding homes." "Ask each family," Ethan said firmly. "No one gets photographed without saying yes." "Of course." As they cleaned up, Maya helped Ruth fold remaining clothes, learning to make crisp corners. Ethan swept while Grace updated inventory lists. Lena quietly photographed empty hangers, evidence of need met, and Ruth's weathered hand smoothing fabric. "Same time next Saturday?" Ruth asked the room. Everyone nodded. Walking home, Maya slipped her hand into Ethan's. "Dad, you smiled today." A real smile. "Did I?" "When you were helping Mr. Santos and the young Marine, and when Tommy Lou figured out his tie." Ethan squeezed her hand. For the first time in 3 years, since the funeral, he'd felt like himself, not just surviving, but contributing, being useful. The basement lights stayed on until Ruth finished pressing one last shirt, hanging it carefully for Monday's first visitor, ready for whatever came next. Monday morning arrived with unusual commotion outside Riverside Elementary. News vans lined the street where school buses usually parked. Parents clustered on the sidewalk, phones raised, recording whatever was about to happen. Brent Wallace stood on the school steps, adjusting his tie for the 3rd time. Behind him, a hastily arranged podium bore the school district seal. Local reporters checked their equipment, while a crew from the state capitol tested their satellite feed. "Thank you all for coming," Brent began, his politician's smile broad and practiced. "As chairman of the Parent-Teacher Association and a member of the City Council, I have a responsibility to our community's children." Inside the school, Grace watched through her classroom window, stomach knotting. She fumbled for her phone to text Lena, but the press conference was already streaming live. "The so-called Dignity Closet, operating in our school basement," Brent continued, "has been presented as a grassroots community effort. But I've discovered the truth." He paused for effect, letting cameras focus. "This program is bankrolled by none other than Lena Alvarez, CEO of Lena, the same fashion company that made headlines 3 years ago for exploiting workers in Bangladesh and Vietnam." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras swiveled toward shocked parents. "Ms. Alvarez has been using our children, as props in her redemption campaign, taking photos, gathering their stories, all to rehabilitate her tarnished brand." Brent held up printed screenshots, Lena's subtle photographs from Saturday, taken with permission, but now twisted out of context. Is this the kind of influence we want in our schools? Ethan had just parked his truck after his morning shift when reporters surrounded him. He'd been thinking about Saturday's success, planning to stop by the closet after picking up Maya. "Mr. Cole, did you know about Lena Alvarez's involvement? Were you paid to participate? Is this all staged for her comeback?" Microphones pressed toward his face. Cameras flashed. Someone shoved a photo of him helping Carlos Santos, a private moment made public, captioned with speculation about Lena's working-class marketing strategy. Ethan's hands clenched, his jaw locked in that way Maya recognized as dangerous quiet. Without a word, he pushed through the crowd, ignoring their shouted questions, and drove away. The school day passed in whispers. Children repeated what they'd overheard from parents. Maya sat through math class with her head down, cheeks burning when classmates stared. At lunch, Tommy Liu asked if the suit he'd worn to his recital was dirty money. Maya fled to the bathroom and didn't come out until the bell rang. Grace tried to teach, but her hands shook, holding the chalk. 3 parents had already emailed demanding their children's photos be deleted. The principal called her to his office during planning period, his face grave. "We need to discuss your sister's involvement." That evening, Ethan set down 2 plates of spaghetti jarred sauce, nothing fancy. Maya pushed noodles around without eating. "Dad?" Her voice came out small. "Did we do something wrong?" The question hit him like shrapnel. He'd been asking himself the same thing all afternoon. By helping people? No, baby. That's never wrong. But Mr. Wallace said, "Mr. Wallace says a lot of things." Maya's eyes filled. "Kids at school said we were tricked, that we're just commercials for some rich lady." Ethan reached across their small table, taking her hand. Her fingers were so little still, paint under the nails from art class. "We just wanted to help," he said slowly, searching for truth in the mess. The Santos family needed interview clothes. The Leas needed that suit. That was real. He squeezed gently. "But maybe we've been made into someone's story, without meaning to be. Like when the news came to Dad's funeral, Maya remembered cameras then too, strangers calling him a hero while she just wanted her daddy back. Something like that." A knock interrupted. Grace stood on their porch, holding a casserole dish like armor. "I brought dinner," she said, then saw their plates. "Or dessert. It's apple crisp." Ethan let her in but didn't meet her eyes. Maya hugged her teacher and disappeared to her room. "Ethan, I'm so sorry. I had no idea Brentwood—" "Did you know?" His voice stayed level, controlled. "About your sister?" Grace set down the dish. "She told me Friday night, after she'd already transferred the funds. I should have told you, but everything happened so fast, and people needed— I won't have Maya used." The words came out sharp. "Not for anyone's redemption story, not for PR. Not for anything. That's not what this is. Lena genuinely wants to help. Rich people always do, until it gets complicated." He turned toward the window, shoulders rigid. "I've been in those boardrooms, Grace. After my unit made the news, everyone wanted to help the wounded warriors until the cameras left. Then the funding dried up, and we were just damaged goods again." Grace wanted to touch his shoulder to ease the tension there, but didn't dare. "This is different." "Is it? Your sister's company hurt people. Now she shows up here, throwing money around, taking pictures of my daughter's photo of me." His hand went to his collar, touching the mended fabric. "I won't be anybody's charity case, and I won't let Maya be either." "So you'll quit? Let Brent win?" "I don't know. The admission cost him. I need to think." Grace gathered her purse. At the door, she turned back. Those 43 families on Saturday, they weren't props. They were neighbors helping neighbors. Don't let Brent poison that. After she left, Ethan stood in his bedroom, holding the blue shirt. He'd worn it to every school event for 2 years, pressed it carefully each time, mended it with the same precision he'd once maintained his dress uniform. He hung it in the closet, smoothing the fabric. pride and shame tangled in his chest like fishing line, impossible to separate. From her room, Maya watched through the cracked door as her father stood there, hand on the shirt, deciding something she couldn't name. The warehouse forklift hummed beneath Ethan, but his mind stayed elsewhere. Each pallet he moved felt heavier than usual, weighted with yesterday's humiliation. During break, his supervisor mentioned seeing him on the news. "That your shirt they were talking about?" The question came without malice, but Ethan's jaw tightened anyway. "Just trying to help some families," he said, crushing his coffee cup. "Nothing wrong with that." But the supervisor's eyes said different things, pity mixed with curiosity, the look Ethan hated most. Across town, Grace paced her small apartment while Lena sat cross-legged on the worn couch, designer heels kicked off. "Were they true?" Grace's voice cracked. "The labor stories?" Lena studied her manicured nails. "Some of it. Not all, but enough." She looked up, and Grace saw something raw there. "When Lena was starting, I made compromises. Chose factories I shouldn't have, ignored reports I should have read." Her fingers twisted. "I told myself it was temporary, just until we got established." Classic excuse, right? "You knew children were working in those factories?" "Not children, but the hours, the wages." Lena's voice dropped. "I fixed it, Grace. Spent 3 years and millions reforming our supply chain, third-party audits, living wages, the whole thing. But Brent's not wrong, the stain's still there." Grace sank into the opposite chair. "And now you're here trying to wash it clean?" "Maybe." Lena met her sister's gaze. "Or maybe I'm here because I saw a man wearing dignity like armor and thought, that's what I've been missing. That's what all my fancy clothes never had." That evening, both sisters stood on Ethan's narrow porch. Through the window, they could see him helping Maya with homework, patient despite the exhaustion in his shoulders. He answered the door in a faded Marines t-shirt, paint stained from weekend projects. "We need 5 minutes," Grace said. "I told you, I need time, not for apologies." Lena stepped forward. "For a business proposition." The word business made him pause. He let them in. Maya hugged Grace, then studied Lena with artist's eyes. "You look like Ms. Alvarez, but shinier." "Story of my life," Lena muttered, which earned her Ethan's first almost smile. While Maya retreated to finish math problems, Lena spread papers on the kitchen table. Not glossy presentations, but hand-drawn sketches. "The anonymous donation model failed," she began. "It became about me, not the community. So forget that." She pointed to her drawings. "What if we created something real? A made-here line. Take donated clothes. Have local seamstresses transform them. Sell them at fair prices. Not charity commerce." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Using us for profit?" "Using profit for sustainability. Everything earned goes back to the dignity closet. No outside investors, no corporate overhead, just neighbors creating for neighbors." She pulled out another sheet, rough calculations. "Ruth's Quilting Circle has 12 members. Pay them $15 an hour, part-time to start. That's real income for retirees on fixed budgets." Despite himself, Ethan leaned closer. His mind automatically calculated workflow, inventory management, distribution logistics. Who runs operations? The question slipped out before he could stop it. Someone who understands systems, someone trusted locally. Lena met his gaze. "Someone like you. I'm not your poster boy. I'm not asking you to be. I'm asking you to help build something that works. Your experience, their skills, my initial funding to get it started, then it runs itself." Grace added quietly, "The Johnsons need interview clothes next week." The Pham twins outgrew their winter coats. This keeps the closet open without depending on viral posts or charity drives. Ethan stood, pacing to the sink. Through the window, he could see the elementary school, lit windows where janitors worked late. "Conditions," he said without turning. "First, everything preserves dignity. No photos without explicit permission, no sob stories, no saving anybody. Agreed. Second, transparent books. Every dollar tracked, every wage fair. Of course. Third, he faced them now. My daughter stays out of it. No more displays, no more viral posts. She's a kid, not a symbol. Absolutely. Maya's voice drifted from the hallway. Dad, can I show you my math? Coming, baby. But he didn't move yet. I'll think about it. That's all I'm promising. After they left, Ethan sat with Maya's completed homework, checking her division. His mind kept drifting to production schedules, quality control, distribution channels. Old military habits: see a problem, build a solution. He pulled out a yellow legal pad, the kind he'd used for mission planning, started sketching workflow, donation intake, sorting, design, production, inventory, sales. His hand moved steadily, mapping systems. Maya crept behind him, chin on his shoulder. What's that? Maybe nothing, maybe something. She studied his neat diagrams. Looks like when you planned our camping trip. Everything in boxes and arrows. Same idea, making sure things work right. So people can get nice clothes? So people can work for nice clothes. There's a difference. Maya nodded solemnly, then added, Can I draw a logo? Every business needs a logo. We'll see. But he was already making space on the paper for her addition, his careful systems leaving room for her artist's heart. Saturday morning arrived crisp and bright. The church fellowship hall hummed with anticipation as Ruth Whitaker arranged folding chairs in a circle, the same formation they'd used for 20 years of quilting. Never thought we'd need the whole space, Dorothy Chen said, adjusting her glasses. At 72, she'd sewn uniforms at the textile mill for 30 years before it closed. Never thought anyone would want what we do, added Shirley Barnes, whose fingers bore permanent indentations from decades of thimble work. The door opened. Lena entered carrying a briefcase, real leather, not the designer kind, followed by Grace with boxes of muffins, Ethan hauling donated clothes, and Maya skipping alongside with her art supplies. The quilting circle went quiet. These women knew Lena's face from magazine covers at the grocery checkout. Now she stood in their humble hall, looking oddly vulnerable. Ruth broke the silence. Coffee's on. Decaf too, for those of us with temperamental hearts. The tension eased. Women settled into chairs, some pulling out reading glasses, others flexing arthritic fingers. Lena opened her briefcase and pulled out simple contracts, not the dense legal documents they'd feared. $15 an hour, she began. Part-time hours you choose. No minimums, no quotas. You work when you can. Why? Dorothy's question cut straight through. Why us? You could hire anybody. Because you know the value of a proper hem. Because you've made beauty from scraps your whole lives. Lena's polished exterior cracked slightly. Because Ruth told me you used to fix clothes for families who couldn't afford new ones, never asking for thanks. Ethan unpacked donations onto long tables, his military precision creating neat categories: men's shirts, women's blouses, children's clothes, items needing minor fixes versus complete transformation. This jacket, Shirley lifted a worn blazer, good bones, but dated. Take in the shoulders, update the buttons, it's interview ready. These jeans, Dorothy held up a pair with blown knees, perfect for patches. Make them intentional instead of accidental. Ruth stood slowly, her weathered hands steady as she picked up the contract. 40 years I worked a machine at the mill. 20 years since, I've been stitching for free, telling myself it's just to keep busy. But this, her voice caught, this says our hands still matter. She signed with the pen she'd used for sympathy cards and grocery lists, but her signature looked different somehow, stronger. One by one, the others followed. Agnes, who'd hemmed her 5 children's clothes and now altered her grandchildren's. Margaret, whose husband's recent death left her with long, empty days. Evelyn, still spry at 81, who'd taught sewing at the high school before budget cuts killed the program. Grace passed around muffins, blueberry, and banana nut, while the women read their contracts carefully. These weren't women who signed anything lightly. Maya sat cross-legged near the window, sketching on donation receipts and paper bags. Hearts appeared in her drawings, small and imperfect, surrounding shirts and dresses like protective embraces. "What about taxes?" Margaret asked. "All documented, all above board," Lena assured. "W-2s, the works. This is real employment." "Health insurance?" Agnes wondered. "Not yet. But if this grows." Lena left the possibility hanging. Ethan distributed supplies, new scissors that cut clean, seam rippers that didn't catch, measuring tapes that hadn't stretched with age. Each woman received her own kit in a sturdy box. "Military surplus containers," he explained. "Waterproof, lockable, your tools stay your tools." By noon, the transformation had begun. Sewing machines appeared from closets and car trunks, old Singers and sturdy Kenmores that had outlasted marriages and mortgages. Extension cords created a web of power across the floor. Ruth started humming "Amazing Grace." Dorothy joined on the second verse. Soon, 12 voices rose and fell with the rhythm of needles through fabric, that ancient cadence of creation. A men's shirt became a child's dress with clever pleating. A dated skirt transformed into a modern pencil silhouette. Trouser hems rose and fell according to current fashion, guided by a magazine Lena had brought, not her high-end publication, but a practical style guide for everyday people. "This reminds me of the war," Agnes said suddenly. "My mother's stories, making something from nothing because you had to. Only now we're choosing to," Ruth finished. Maya showed her sketches to each woman, gathering opinions on her logo designs. They treated her artwork with the same seriousness they gave their stitching, offering gentle suggestions that made her beam. By 4 o'clock, 3 boxes sat, filled with transformed garments. Each piece tagged with care instructions and the initials of its seamstress pride of craftsmanship returned. The women began packing up, movements slower than the morning but spirits visibly lighter. Promises to return Monday morning rang through the hall. Dorothy and Shirley debated thread colors for next week. Margaret asked Agnes for a ride, planning their schedule together. Ethan loaded boxes into his truck with the same care he'd once used for ammunition transport. Each piece represented hours of skilled labor, dignity restored through patient hands. The parking lot emptied except for his truck and Grace's sedan. She stood beside him as the evening painted the sky purple-orange, that particular Midwest sunset that made even ordinary things look blessed. "Thank you," she said, "for organizing everything, for staying. Just boxes and sorting, nothing special." "You know that's not true." They stood close enough that he could smell her shampoo, something simple, like green apples. Neither moved to leave. "I should get Maya home," he said finally. "Of course." But another minute passed before either shifted. The church bells chimed 6 o'clock, breaking the spell. "See you Monday?" Grace asked. "Yeah, Monday." Maya appeared at the church door, arms full of drawings. "Dad, Mrs. Ruth wants to frame one of my logos." The moment dissolved into ordinary evening tasks, buckling seatbelts, checking mirrors, driving home. But Ethan caught himself glancing back at Grace in his rearview mirror, still standing by her car, watching them leave. Sunday service ended with the congregation singing "Amazing Grace," voices rising through the small church like hope itself. Ruth caught Ethan's sleeve as he guided Maya toward the door. "Come for tea, both of you." She nodded at Grace. "Got something to show you." Ruth's house sat 3 blocks from the church, a tidy bungalow with roses climbing the porch rails despite October's chill. Inside, doilies covered every surface, and photos of her late husband Carl lined the mantel. Carl in uniform, Carl at the mill, Carl holding a much younger Ruth. She served tea in china cups that rattled against their saucers as her hands trembled slightly. Maya sipped carefully, legs swinging from the high-backed chair. Been carrying these 40 years. Ruth pulled a ring of keys from her apron pocket. They clinked together, heavy and tarnished. From the mill. Ethan set down his cup. The textile mill? But it's been closed 23 years next month. Ruth turned the keys over in her palm. Mr. Hartley, the owner, he's at Shady Oaks now. 94, and sharp as ever. Visited him Thursday. She paused, choosing her words like selecting thread for delicate fabric. Told him about the closet. About the made here idea. He said. Her voice wavered. He said the mill's been waiting for purpose again. Gave permission to use it however we see fit. Grace leaned forward. Ruth, are you saying? I'm saying we have ourselves a building, if we want it. Within minutes, they piled into Ethan's truck. Ruth directed them past the elementary school, beyond the new strip mall, to where the town frayed into memory. The mill rose against the sky, red brick gone rusty with age, windows broken in places like missing teeth. Ruth's key groaned in the lock. The door swung open to reveal a cavern of possibility. Dust particles danced in shafts of afternoon light. The space stretched enormous concrete floors, worn smooth by thousands of feet, ceiling beams still solid after a century, walls that had absorbed decades of honest work. Maya's footsteps echoed as she wandered, her small figure dwarfed by the vastness. Ethan walked slower, hands brushing equipment left behind an industrial sewing machine under a tarp, shelving units that once held bolts of fabric, a mechanical loom frozen mid-weave. My station was there. Ruth pointed to a corner where light pooled. Worked the serger. Could hem 200 pairs of pants in a shift. Ethan examined the electrical panels, the plumbing, the bones of the building. His mind shifted into planning mode, seeing work zones and storage areas, calculating square footage and workflow. The structure's sound, he said, needs cleaning, some repairs, but the foundation's solid. Grace stood in the center, turning slowly. It could work. It could really work. Word spread the way small-town news always did through phone calls and grocery store encounters, church parking lots and sidewalk conversations. By evening, pickups and minivans filled the mill's cracked parking lot. They came with purpose. Veterans brought push brooms and shop vacs. The high school football team hauled broken crates and rusted equipment to a dumpster someone had arranged. Women from Ruth's quilting circle arrived with buckets and rags, their grown children in tow. Dorothy Chen's grandson strung extension cords for work lights. The pastor's wife organized a sandwich station on sawhorses. Someone plugged in a radio, and classic rock mixed with the sounds of labor. Ethan found himself directing traffic, his command voice returning naturally. Stack salvageable lumber there. Metal scraps in that corner for recycling. Children turned work into play, chasing each other with feather dusters, their laughter brightening dark corners. Maya sketched the scene from her perch on a crate, capturing neighbors becoming community. Grace worked beside Agnes, scrubbing windows. Soap suds ran down glass, revealing clearer views with each pass. Haven't seen folks pull together like this since the flood of '98, Agnes said. Near 10 o'clock, no one remembered who brought Christmas lights from their garage. Within an hour, strings of tiny bulbs crisscrossed the rafters, their soft glow transforming industrial space into something magical. Ruth stood beside Ethan as volunteers began drifting home, leaving behind a building remarkably changed. The concrete floor was swept clean, broken glass had vanished, salvageable equipment stood organized along one wall. Carl would have loved this, Ruth said quietly, always believed in second chances. For buildings or people? Ethan asked. Both, I suppose. Grace approached with Maya, who'd fallen asleep against her shoulder, sketchbook clutched to her chest. I should get her home. Ethan took his daughter gently, her weight familiar and precious. Thank you. For staying late. For everything. Their eyes met over Maya's sleeping form. Something unspoken passed between them, gratitude mixing with something deeper, newer, frightening in its possibility. As the last cars pulled away, the mill stood different than it had that morning, not restored yet, but no longer abandoned. The twinkle lights continued their quiet glow through windows now clean enough to share that light with the world. Monday would bring questions, permits and codes, logistics and expenses. But tonight, the old mill breathed with potential, its walls ready once again to shelter work that mattered. The old mill developed its own rhythm within days. Monday evening brought 12 veterans to Ruth's sewing stations, their thick fingers learning to thread needles, guided by patient hands that had done this work for decades. Keep the fabric taut, not tight, Ruth instructed Tom Briggs, whose shaking hands betrayed his Parkinson's. The machine does the work. You just guide it. Across the floor, teenagers from the high school sorted donations by size and condition. They'd started coming after basketball practice, drawn by community service hours, but staying for the stories the older workers told. Ethan moved between stations with a clipboard, his schedule mapped out in military precision. Color-coded zones marked different activities. Time slots prevented overcrowding. Supply lists tracked every button and spool of thread. Wednesday brought different energy. Folding tables replaced sewing machines. Laptops appeared, donated by the library. Men and women who'd lost jobs when the factories closed sat with Grace and other volunteers, building resumes from decades of experience they'd forgotten how to value. 20 years running a drill press translates to precision manufacturing expertise, Grace explained to Harold, whose work history felt thin on paper. Your safety record? That's leadership and reliability. Maya did homework at a card table in the corner, occasionally looking up to watch her father coordinate deliveries or help someone adjust a sewing machine. Her latest sketch, a heart made of thread, wrapped around a simple shirt, lay finished beside her math worksheet. Dad, look. She held it up during a quiet moment Thursday evening. Ethan studied the drawing with the same attention he'd once given tactical maps. The design was simple but powerful, hope literally stitched into dignity. This should be our logo, he said, tacking it to the exposed brick wall where everyone could see. Lena arrived Friday with a van full of supplies. Bolts of fabric salvaged from her company's dead stock, professional scissors, industrial thread. She moved through the space quietly, observing the transformation, occasionally stopping to admire a hem or adjusted seam. Saturday pulled everyone together. Production day. The quilting circle commanded one corner, their machines humming in harmony. Veterans pressed garments with military creases. Teenagers tagged items with handwritten cards, remade with love in our town. Neighbors who'd whispered about Ethan's shirt weeks ago now stopped by with casseroles and coffee. Mrs. Peterson from the bank brought her father's suits, untouched since his funeral. Better they help someone find work than gather dust, she said, not quite meeting Ethan's eyes, her earlier judgment hanging unspoken between them. The following Monday, Grace found another note slipped under her apartment door. Same anonymous printing, "Stop pushing your charity agenda on our kids." She burned it in her kitchen sink, watching the paper curl black. The smoke alarm chirped. She opened windows, letting night air clear the bitter smell. Tuesday's note was worse. "We know where you live." She burned that one too, then called Lena. "Maybe we should tell someone," Lena suggested. "Tell them what? That someone's leaving notes?" Brent would say it proves we're dividing the community. Wednesday evening, exhaustion hit them all. The mill's lights seemed dimmer, the work heavier. Grace caught herself nodding off over attendance sheets while Maya practiced long division beside her. "You should go home," Ethan said, appearing with 2 cups of coffee from the ancient percolator someone had donated. "Soon. Just need to finish these forms for the co-op filing." "That's what you said 2 hours ago." They sat on shipping crates as the mill quieted around them. Only a few seamstresses remained, their conversation a low murmur across the space. "Sarah loved old buildings," Ethan said suddenly. "My wife. She'd drag me to every historical site within driving distance. Said they held stories in their bones." Grace shifted slightly closer. She sounds wonderful. She was. Cancer took her when Maya was 4. Some days I still reach for her side of the bed. My fiancé didn't die, Grace offered carefully. Just left. Week before the wedding. Said teaching would never pay enough for the life he wanted. His loss. That's what everyone says. Doesn't make it hurt less. They sat with their shared griefs, comfortable in the quiet understanding that some wounds never fully healed, just learned to coexist with joy. Around them, the mill held its breath, twinkle lights casting soft shadows on work that mattered. Maya had fallen asleep against Grace's shoulder, division problems abandoned, pencil still clutched in her small hand. I should get her home, Ethan said, not moving yet. She's fine. Let her sleep a minute more. Through the clean windows, stars appeared one by one. Inside, sewing machines wound down to silence. Ruth gathered her things, pausing to pat Ethan's shoulder as she passed. Finally, reluctantly, Ethan lifted his daughter. Grace walked with them to the parking lot, Maya's backpack slung over her shoulder. At her car, she hesitated. The notes don't scare me, you know. What we're building here, it's worth whatever Brent throws at us. Ethan shifted Maya's weight, freeing one hand to briefly touch Grace's arm. We're all here. You're not facing him alone. She drove away, taillights disappearing around the corner. Ethan stood in the empty lot, holding his sleeping daughter, surrounded by a building reborn and a community slowly stitching itself back together. 2 weeks flew past in a blur of scissors and steam presses. The mill transformed hour by hour. Fairy lights wound through rafters, borrowed folding chairs arranged in rows. Ruth's quilting circle worked overtime, their fingers flying across fabric with decades of muscle memory. Saturday arrived crisp and bright. By 5 o'clock, the parking lot overflowed. Families who'd never set foot in the mill climbed the worn steps, children racing ahead while grandparents moved carefully over the threshold. The makeshift runway stretched down the center, plywood covered in donated carpet remnants, but under the warm lights, it looked almost professional. Maya's heart and shirt logo hung on printed banners, simple sheets that Lena had rushed through a local print shop. I'm not doing this, Ethan muttered backstage, staring at the jacket Ruth held out. Yes, you are, Ruth said firmly. The jacket was a masterpiece, navy wool from a banker's suit, gray flannel from a professor's blazer, all seamlessly joined with invisible stitches. It's for the kids, not. The kids need to see their parents standing tall. That includes you. The show began with the youngest models. 5-year-old Timmy Henderson strutted out in a superhero cape fashioned from old curtains, his grandfather, a Vietnam veteran, escorting him with parade ground precision. The crowd erupted. Twin sisters modeled matching dresses made from their late grandmother's quilts, the patterns deliberately mismatched but somehow perfect. Their mother wept openly in the third row. Teenagers followed, self-conscious but glowing in tailored pieces that actually fit. Marcus Williams, the high school quarterback, wore a 3-piece suit altered from donations, looking ready for prom or a job interview, whichever came first. Mr. Cole, you're up, Grace whispered, appearing at his elbow. The jacket fit perfectly. Ruth had worked magic with the measurements, creating something that honored his military bearing while softening the edges. Ethan's hands shook slightly as he straightened the lapels. Maya's watching, Grace added softly. She's so proud. That decided it. Ethan stepped onto the runway. The first steps felt like walking through mud. Then the lights caught him, warm and forgiving, and muscle memory kicked in. Shoulders back, chin up, the same bearing that had carried him through 2 tours in Afghanistan. Applause started slowly, then built to thunder. Someone whistled. Mrs. Peterson dabbed at her eyes. Even Brent Wallace's wife clapped, though her husband sat stone-faced beside her. Halfway down, Ethan spotted Maya in the front row, her face luminous with joy. She jumped up, hands pressed to her heart, mouthing, "That's my dad." Something loosened in his chest. For years, He'd carried himself like a man under siege. Every day a small battle against circumstances. But here, now, surrounded by neighbors who'd worked alongside him, wearing a jacket stitched from community donations, he felt the weight lift. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was standing tall. The return walk felt like floating. Grace waited at the runway's edge, her eyes bright with something more than pride. The crowd kept clapping as more models emerged. Ruth herself in a stunning shawl made from silk scarves, the mayor's wife in an upcycled cocktail dress, regular people transformed not just by clothing, but by the dignity of being seen. The finale brought everyone on stage together. Maya ran to Ethan, wrapping her arms around his waist. He lifted her easily, and she waved to the crowd from his arms, her logo visible on every banner behind them. "Thank you all for coming." Grace spoke into a borrowed microphone, her teacher's voice carrying clearly. "Every piece you see tonight was made by our neighbors for our neighbors. This isn't charity, it's community." Pledges poured in immediately. The hardware store owner promised lumber for clothing racks. The coffee shop offered their back room for fittings. Even some of Brent's supporters quietly slipped checks into the donation box. As the crowd dispersed, volunteers began cleanup. Ethan found himself in a quiet corner with Grace, stacking chairs while the noise of celebration continued around them. "You were magnificent up there," she said. "I felt ridiculous at first. But not at the end." "No. At the end, I felt," he searched for words, "like myself, the self I was before." She stepped closer, close enough that he could smell the vanilla scent of her shampoo, see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. The moment stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Grace's hand found his, their fingers intertwining naturally. He leaned toward her, drawn by something stronger than gravity. She tilted her face up, lips parting slightly. For a heartbeat, they hovered there, breath mingling. Then Ethan pulled back, dropping her hand as if it burned. "I'm sorry. I don't deserve—" "Ethan, Sarah was the love of my life. I don't get another chance at happiness. That's not how it works." Grace's face fell, but she nodded slowly. "I understand. But Ethan, Sarah loved you. She'd want you to be happy." Before he could respond, Ruth appeared, having observed the whole exchange with the wisdom of her years. She squeezed Ethan's shoulder, her voice gentle but firm. "Hope looks good on you, Ethan. Don't be so quick to take it off." The old woman walked away, leaving them standing among the stacked chairs and dying light, the echo of applause still ringing in the air, the weight of almost lifting slowly from Ethan's shoulders. Ethan arrived at the mill before sunrise, carrying coffee and the production schedule for the week ahead. The morning air bit sharp through his work jacket, not the tailored one from last night, but his everyday canvas coat with the frayed cuffs. Yellow tape stretched across the entrance like a wound. "Closed by order of city inspector, pending investigation of code." Violation. She stood there, coffee cooling in his hand, reading the notice 3 times before the words sank in. Behind the tape, through dusty windows, he could see Ruth's sewing station, Maya's logo sketches still tacked to the wall, boxes of sorted donations waiting to become something more. His phone buzzed. "Grace, have you seen the blog post?" The clip ran 2 minutes and 14 seconds. Someone had filmed children modeling clothes, their faces clear, voices audible. But the editing made it sinister, slow motion on Maya twirling, zoom on donation boxes with Lena logos digitally added, audio overlaid suggesting brand ambassadors and youth marketing initiatives. None of it true, all of it believable. By noon, Lena called an emergency meeting at Grace's apartment. Her usual composure had cracked, mascara smudged beneath her eyes. The board voted this morning. All philanthropic spending frozen pending investigation. She held up her phone, showing email after email. They're calling it a PR disaster. Stock dropped 8% at opening. "What about the seamstresses?" Ruth asked quietly. "I'll pay from my personal accounts." which the board can block if they claim misuse of company resources, Lena's lawyer interrupted via speakerphone. Any payment could be seen as admission of wrongdoing. Ruth's weathered hands trembled as she held the contract promising 2 weeks' wages. Beside her, 3 other women from the quilting circle sat silent, already calculating which bills wouldn't get paid. Ethan's chest tightened. These women had trusted him, followed his schedules, believed his promises of dignity and fair wages. Now they held worthless paper. "We'll figure something out," Grace said, but her voice lacked conviction. "With what money?" Brent's voice came from the doorway he'd let himself in, uninvited. "The city can't support businesses that exploit children. The inspector found 17 violations at that mill. Exposed wiring, inadequate exits, no permits for assembly." He smiled, all teeth. "I tried to warn you about outsider influence." After he left, silence settled heavy. One by one, the women filed out. Ruth squeezed Ethan's hand before leaving, but said nothing. What was there to say? That evening, Ethan called everyone to the church basement. Word had spread, the room overflowed with anxious faces. Parents who'd volunteered, teenagers who'd learned to hem, families who'd finally felt hope. "The mill's closed," he said simply. "The funding's frozen. I don't know when or if paychecks will come." Margaret Chen, who'd worked double shifts beside Ruth, started crying. Her husband had been laid off last month. They'd counted on this income. "My daughter's inhaler costs $80, Tom Rodriguez said quietly. That paycheck was going to cover it. Each story hit Ethan like a physical blow. These people had rallied because of him, trusted because of him. His pride in doing things right, in preserving dignity, it had blinded him to the risks. "I'm resigning from leadership," he announced, effective immediately. "Ethan, no," Grace started forward. "I won't put anyone else through this. Not Maya, not any of you." He looked at Grace directly. "Especially not you." He walked out before anyone could respond, their shocked silence following him into the night. The next morning, Maya came home from school with her backpack clutched tight, eyes red. "What happened, baby?" Tommy Wallace said his dad told him, "We're thieves, that we tricked people into giving us stuff." Her voice broke. "He said you're a beggar in a borrowed jacket." Ethan's hands clenched. He wanted to march to Brent's office, wanted to shake the smugness out of him. Instead, he knelt beside his daughter. "We didn't do anything wrong. Then why is everyone mad?" He had no answer that a 10-year-old could understand. How could he explain that sometimes doing right looked wrong to people who needed it to? Grace texted that evening. "School board issued formal reprimand. Inappropriate involvement in political activities? My job's under review." He didn't respond. What could he say that wouldn't make it worse? Late that night, after Maya finally slept, Ethan sat at the kitchen table. The blue shirt lay folded in front of him, each crease precise. He'd worn it to every meeting, every moment that mattered. It had started all this, the photo, the attention, the hope that turned to ash. The shirt held his attempts at dignity, his pride in appearance despite circumstances. Now it felt like evidence of his failure. He'd reached for more than survival and grabbed disaster instead. Outside, November wind rattled windows. Bills sat stacked beside the shirt, electric, water, Maya's school supplies. The warehouse had cut his hours after the press coverage. "Not a good look for us," his supervisor had mumbled. Ethan traced the shirt's mended collar, feeling each careful stitch. Sarah had taught him to sew during her chemo, insisting he'd need the skill someday. "For when I'm gone," she'd said, and he'd told her to stop talking nonsense. Now the skill felt like mockery. He could mend shirts, but not circumstances, could stitch fabric, but not communities back together. The kitchen clock ticked toward midnight. Tomorrow he'd need to find Maya breakfast, pretend everything was fine, send her to school where classmates would whisper. Tomorrow he'd need to figure out how to pay Ruth and the others from his own empty pockets. Tonight, though, he just sat with his failure folded neat before him, wondering how hope had unraveled so fast. Sunday morning came gray and cold. Ethan helped Maya into her good dress, the one from the dignity closet, before everything fell apart and they walked to church in silence. The blue shirt stayed folded in his drawer. He wore an old flannel instead, not caring about appearances anymore. Inside, familiar faces turned their way. Some nodded with sympathy, others looked away. Ethan steered Maya past their usual seats near the front, past the Chens and the Rodriguezes, past the empty spaces where Ruth's quilting circle usually gathered. He chose the very last pew, tucked against the back wall where shadows pooled. Maya slid in beside him, her small hand finding his. "It's not your fault, Daddy," she whispered, leaning into his shoulder. The words cut deeper than any accusation could have. His 10-year-old daughter was comforting him, taking on weight she shouldn't carry. He'd failed at the one thing that mattered, protecting her from the world's sharp edges. Pastor Williams began the sermon, something about perseverance through trials, but the words blurred together. Ethan stared at his hands, seeing phantom fabric beneath his fingers, remembering the hope in Margaret Chen's eyes when she'd signed that first contract, a rustle beside him. Ruth had left her usual spot and settled into their pew, her weathered hands folded over a worn Bible. She didn't speak, didn't look at him, just sat there like an anchor in rough seas. Halfway through the service, she slipped him a piece of paper. Her handwriting, spidery but clear. Even broken threads still hold a quilt together. He crushed the note in his fist, fighting the burn behind his eyes. After the final hymn, as others filed out making small talk about weather and Sunday dinners, Ruth touched his elbow. "Need help carrying fabric rolls to my house. Bad hips acting up." They both knew she'd carried heavier loads with that hip. But Ethan nodded, grateful for the excuse to avoid the parking lot conversations. Maya helped too, arms wrapped around a bolt of blue cotton as they followed Ruth home. Her house sat 3 blocks from church, white clapboard with a garden dormant for winter. Inside smelled like lavender and old wood, photographs covering every surface, her husband in uniform, children now grown and moved away, grandchildren gap-toothed and grinning. "Sit," Ruth commanded, pointing to her floral sofa. "Maya, honey, there's cookies in the kitchen. Snickerdoodles." Maya glanced at Ethan, who nodded. When she disappeared around the corner, Ruth pulled a quilt from a cedar chest. The pattern was complex wedding rings interlocking, blues and grays and sudden bursts of yellow. Made this after Harold died. She ran her fingers across the stitching. Couldn't bear to throw out his letters, but keeping them in a box felt like burial. She turned the quilt over, showing him the backing. There, barely visible through the fabric, were shadows of paper, letters sewn into the lining. February 12, 1969, she pointed to one section. Writing from Da Nang about missing my pot roast. March 3rd, right here, telling me about a buddy who didn't make it home. Her finger traced another shadow. April 20th, saying he dreamed about our daughter's first steps. Ethan's throat tightened. "Point is," Ruth continued, settling beside him, "life unravels sometimes, comes apart at the seams, but love, real love that can be stitched back. Different pattern maybe, but still holding. I let everyone down. You gave us purpose." First time in years these hands mattered for more than casseroles and sympathy cards. "And now you're not getting paid. Margaret needs that money. Margaret's survived worse. We all have." Ruth studied him. "You know what your problem is, Ethan Cole? You think dignity means never needing anyone, but dignity is letting folks help you carry the load." Maya returned with a cookie in each hand, offering one to Ethan. He took it, though his stomach churned. "Your daddy's a good man," Ruth told Maya. "Don't let anyone tell you different." They left as afternoon shadows grew long. At home, Ethan made grilled cheese while Maya worked on homework. His phone buzzed, Grace texting about the school board meeting tomorrow, but he let it go unanswered. Across town, Grace knocked on Lena's hotel suite door. Her sister answered in designer pajamas, makeup gone, looking younger and more tired than Grace had seen her in years. "Wine?" Lena offered, already pouring herself a generous glass. School board meeting tomorrow. I need a clear head. For them to formally fire you? They won't fire me. Just restrict me. Make sure I color inside the lines. Grace sank into the plush sofa. You look terrible. Board meeting via video in an hour. They want me to issue a statement distancing Lena from the whole mess. Lena stared into her wine. 20 years building this company, and they still treat me like a liability when things get complicated. Will you do it? I built Lena on compromise. Just this once, I'd tell myself. Just until we're stable. But the compromises never end, Grace. They multiply. Grace watched her sister, seeing past the silk pajamas to the girl who'd once designed dresses from bedsheets, who'd stayed up all night hand-sewing her first collection. So don't compromise this time, and lose everything I've built? Or lose everything you are. Grace moved closer. Lena, you've got more money than God. What's it worth if you can't do one good thing without permission? Lena laughed, bitter and short. You make it sound simple. Right and wrong usually is. The hotel suite's floor-to-ceiling windows framed Monday morning's gray sky as Lena adjusted her laptop. 12 faces stared back from the screen. Lena's board of directors, assembled for emergency session from New York, London, Tokyo. Thank you for joining on short notice. Her voice carried none of its usual careful modulation. I'll be brief. Richard Blackstone, board chair, shifted in his Manhattan office. Lena, we've discussed the statement. Legal has drafted, I'm resigning as CEO, effective immediately. Silence stretched across continents. This is about that provincial closet project? Blackstone's tone sharpened. We agreed you'd distance. I'm done distancing myself from things that matter. Lena stood, pacing past the window. 20 years ago, I promised myself Lena would change fashion. Instead, fashion changed me. Every compromise, every factory I didn't visit, every report I didn't question, I told myself it was necessary. Building the brand, securing market share. You built a $2 billion company, Margaret Chen interrupted from Hong Kong. On whose backs? Lena faced the camera directly. I'm launching a new venture. Worker-owned, transparent supply chain, living wages at every level, starting with a co-op in a small Midwestern town where people still know what dignity means. You'll lose everything, Blackstone warned. Non-compete clauses, already reviewed with my lawyers. I keep my personal assets and patents filed independently. You keep Lena. She paused. Maybe without me, you'll remember what we originally stood for. This is professional suicide. No, this is professional rebirth. She closed the laptop before they could respond. Her hands shook not with fear, but with something she hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Ethan stared at the sandwich he'd made for lunch, appetite gone. Maya was at school. The house felt hollow, like it had those first months after Sarah died. 3 knocks rattled his front door, Ruth's signature rhythm. Not a good time? He called. Good thing I don't care about timing. Ruth let herself in, as she'd done since Sarah's funeral. Church, tonight. 7 o'clock. I'm not ready for more sympathy. Didn't ask for sympathy. Asked for attendance. She studied his untouched sandwich. When's the last time you ate properly? Ruth. 7 o'clock. Bring Maya. Don't make me send the Veterans Auxiliary after you. She left before he could argue, which was probably her plan. By 6:45, Ethan sat in his truck outside the church, Maya beside him with her sketch pad. We don't have to go in, he said. Ms. Ruth said it was important. Ms. Ruth says a lot of things. Maya looked at him with Sarah's eyes. Mom would go. The simplicity of it cut through every excuse. Inside, the fellowship hall buzzed with unexpected energy. Not the usual Monday night Bible study crowd. Veterans from his army days, seamstresses from Ruth's circle, carpenters, electricians, plumbers, half the town packed into folding chairs. There he is, Tom Rodriguez called out, a Marine who ran the hardware store. the man of the hour. I'm not. Sit down and listen, Ruth commanded, guiding them to seats. Jim Patterson, a contractor who'd lost his own business in the recession, stood at the makeshift podium. We all know why we're here. Mill got shut down. Funding got pulled. Some folks want us to believe that's the end. He looked directly at Ethan. But I've been in this town 40 years, and we don't quit when bureaucrats push us around. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. I've got lumber sitting in my warehouse, Jim continued. Tom's got electrical supplies. Margaret's husband's a licensed inspector who'll volunteer his time. Question is, do we fix that mill ourselves, or do we let Brent Wallace win? The permits alone, Ethan started. Emergency rehabilitation permits, said Janet Kowalski, who worked at City Hall. For historical buildings, I pulled the paperwork this afternoon. Just needs property owner consent, which Ruth has. Ethan felt the room's eyes on him, not with judgment but with expectation. I'm not your leader. I failed. You showed up, interrupted Walter Hayes, Vietnam vet who rarely spoke at gatherings. When my kid needed interview clothes, you spent 2 hours teaching him to tie a Windsor knot. That's leadership. You organized schedules so everyone could contribute, added Margaret. Made us feel useful again. You carried my groceries when my arthritis flared, called out Mrs. Chen from the back. Didn't even mention it to anyone. Story after story, small acts Ethan had forgotten, reflected back at him through grateful eyes. Tom stood. We're not asking you to be perfect, Cole. We're asking you to help us finish what we started. Maya slipped her hand into his, squeezing tight. Okay, Ethan managed, voice rough. But we do this right. Every code, every permit, every safety regulation. Cheers erupted. Plans flew, who had which supplies, which permits needed filing, how to organize work crews. Energy filled the space like electricity before a storm. Later, as committees formed and assignments distributed, Ethan found himself at the altar. Maya knelt beside him on the worn cushions. Thank you, he whispered, not sure if he addressed God, or the universe, or Sarah's memory. For strength I didn't know existed, for people who see better than what I am. Maya leaned against his shoulder. Daddy? Yeah? I think Mom would be proud. Lanterns glowed in the windows, casting golden light across determined faces, still planning, still believing. Tomorrow would bring hammers and saws, permits, and inspections. But tonight, in this church that had seen his wedding and his wife's funeral, Ethan Cole felt something rebuild inside his chest. Not pride, something better, purpose. The mill transformed under 100 willing hands. Monday morning, 7 sharp veterans arrived with toolboxes and determination. By noon, 3 generations worked side by side, teenagers hauling debris, middle-aged mothers sorting supplies, elderly men teaching proper techniques to anyone who'd listen. Ethan stood at a makeshift command post, 2 sawhorses, and a sheet of plywood with blueprints spread like battle maps. His clipboard held duty rosters, supply lists, safety protocols. Old habits from deployment kicked in. Assess, organize, execute. Team 3, northwest corner needs those support beams checked, he called out. Team 5, how's the electrical panel coming? 20 minutes? Tom Rodriguez shouted back, wire strippers between his teeth. Walter Hayes supervised a crew patching holes in the walls, teaching his grandson proper spackling technique. Smooth strokes, like frosting a cake your grandma would be proud of. Ruth's quilting circle had claimed the south corner, their sewing machines humming in harmony. They worked through donated clothes, transforming worn garments into possibilities. Every few hours, Ruth would stand, stretch her back, and inspect progress with the eye of someone who'd worked these floors decades ago. Floors held 1,000 workers once, she told Margaret. They'll hold us just fine. Grace arrived each day at lunch with coolers and crock-pots. Turkey sandwiches on Monday, chili on Tuesday, her mother's tamales on Wednesday. She moved through the workers, refilling water bottles, offering encouragement, her teacher's instinct knowing who needed a kind word. Maya painted signs on cardboard, salvaged from the recycling center. Her careful letters spelled hope. "This is our mill," in blue and green, "Neighbor threads forever," bordered with hearts. She taped them to windows, poles, anywhere visible from the street. "Looking good, little artist," Jim Patterson said, ruffling her hair. "It needs to be perfect," Maya replied, touching up a smudged letter. "No such thing as perfect," Jim said gently. "Just honest effort." Thursday afternoon, Harold Brennan arrived. The licensed inspector had volunteered his time, moved by what he'd heard. He walked through slowly, checking joints, testing outlets, examining fire exits. Workers held their breath. "Few things need adjustment," he said finally, "but nothing we can't fix by Monday. I'll file the paperwork myself." Cheers echoed off the rafters. Friday brought unexpected help. 3 women from Brent Wallace's own church appeared with cleaning supplies and apologies. "We were wrong," said Patricia, who'd whispered about Ethan's shirt that first PTA night. "This is what community looks like." They scrubbed windows until sunlight poured through, illuminating dust motes that danced like celebration confetti. Lunch breaks stretched longer that day, everyone exhausted but unwilling to stop. Ethan found Grace outside, sitting on the loading dock, distributing bottled water to a group of teenagers. "You should rest," he said, settling beside her. "Look who's talking. You've been here since dawn." "Military time. 0600. She smiled. "Show off." They sat quietly watching Maya teach younger kids to stencil hearts on fabric scraps. The March sun felt warm, full of promise. "I need to tell you something," Grace said. Ethan tensed, expecting bad news about her job, the school board, something else falling apart. "I've been afraid," she continued. "After David left my ex, I promised myself I wouldn't. That I'd focus on teaching, keep things simple. Grace, let me finish." She turned to face him. "Watching you this week, seeing how you lead without ego, how you lift everyone around you, it gives me hope. That maybe not all second chances end badly." Her hand rested on the dock between them. Ethan covered it with his calloused fingers, gentle against hers. "I'm scared too," he admitted. "Sarah was my whole world. After she died, I didn't think I deserved—" "Daddy!" Maya called from the doorway. "Ms. Ruth needs you." The moment hung between them, unfinished but understood. Ethan squeezed Grace's hand before standing. "We should talk," he said. "When this is done. I'd like that." Inside, Ruth stood at her sewing station, holding up a blazer transformed from 3 donated suit jackets. "What do you think?" she asked. "For Marcus Thompson's college interview next week." The blazer looked professional, dignified, crafted with love. Ethan thought of Marcus, a kid from the trailer park with straight A's and dreams bigger than his circumstances. "It's perfect," Ethan said. "Nothing's perfect," Ruth replied, echoing Jim. "But it's made with good intentions. Sometimes that's enough." Saturday arrived gray and drizzling, but nobody stayed home. Final push, last repairs, deep cleaning, organizing inventory. The inspector returned, clipboard in hand, checking off requirements one by one. At 4 o'clock he signed the certificate. "You're officially up to code." Ethan shook his hand, then turned to address the crowd of workers, all paint-splattered and exhausted and proud. "We did this," he said simply. "Together." Grace stood near the door, Maya beside her, both beaming. Ruth led the applause that filled the mill, bouncing off walls that had stood empty for 20 years, now ready to serve again. Outside, someone had hung Maya's largest sign, "Built by Neighbors," for neighbors. The rain had stopped. Afternoon sun broke through clouds, making everything gleam. The school board meeting room smelled like old coffee and disappointment. Grace stood at the podium, fluorescent lights harsh overhead, facing 7 board members arranged like judges. Brent Wallace sat to their right, his folder of complaints thick, his smile practiced. "Ms. Alvarez," the board president began, adjusting his glasses. "You've been asked here to address concerns about your involvement with the Dignity Closet program and its subsequent complications. Grace's hands trembled against the podium's edges. Behind her, the public seating filled Ruth in her Sunday dress, veterans from the Mill Project, mothers she recognized from parent conferences. Brent stood first. The issue is simple. Ms. Alvarez used her position to advance a personal agenda, blurring professional boundaries. She brought her sister's controversial business into our school, exposed our children to potential exploitation, and damaged our institution's reputation. He clicked through a PowerPoint screenshots of angry social media posts, the leaked video clip, newspaper headlines. Furthermore, Brent continued, voice dripping concern, she pressured families to participate, making them feel obligated. That's a lie. Maria Santos stood in the third row, her accent thick with emotion. Ms. Grace never pressure nobody. She give my kids winter coats when I couldn't afford. No questions, no shame. Please wait for public comment, the board president said. Brent resumed his presentation, citing policies about teacher conduct, conflict of interest, maintaining professional distance. Each point landed like a stone against Grace's chest. When he finished, the president nodded to Grace. Your response? Grace's mouth felt dry. She thought of Ethan organizing the mill workers, steady and sure. She thought of Maya's signs declaring hope. She thought of every child who'd walked into her classroom, carrying burdens too heavy for their small shoulders. You want to talk about boundaries? Grace's voice cracked, then strengthened. Let's talk about the boundary between helping children and protecting bureaucracy. About the line between following policy and following conscience. She pulled index cards from her pocket but didn't read them. Mr. Wallace speaks of reputation. What reputation? That we're a school that looks the other way when kids come hungry? That we enforce dress codes but ignore the family who can't afford new shoes? Ms. Alvarez, I'm not finished. Grace's teacher voice emerged, firm and clear. You hide behind policies that mask prejudice. You use words like professional boundaries when you mean don't rock the boat. You worry about reputation, while families in this room worry about survival. Brent's smile faltered. That's an outrageous accusation, is it? Grace turned to face him directly. You complained about the mill's code violations only after learning who funded it. You called the program branding our kids, but never offered alternatives. You whispered about Ethan Cole's shirt but never asked if his family needed help. The room stirred. Parents shifted forward. Every policy you cite, Grace continued, addressing the board now, could be used to justify turning away from families who need us most. Is that the reputation we want? That we follow rules over conscience? That we protect ourselves instead of our children? Silence stretched. Then chairs scraped as parents stood. I got something to say. Tom Harrison, construction worker, still in his paint-stained jeans. My daughter got her first job interview outfit from that closet. Got the job too. Night shift at the hospital, paying for community college. My son, another mother, voice shaking. Bullied for wearing the same clothes, the closet gave him confidence. His grades went up. Ms. Grace sat with me, said Janet Perry, the widow from Oak Street. After my husband died, when I couldn't afford school supplies, she made sure my boys had everything, never made us feel small. One by one, they testified. Single mothers, immigrant families, veterans' wives, each story built on the last, filling the room with truth Brent couldn't PowerPoint away. She taught my daughter to read, said Marcus Thompson's grandmother. Stayed after school, no extra pay, because she knew I couldn't help with homework. The board members exchanged glances. Two looked uncomfortable. One wiped her eyes. We need to vote, the president said quietly. But first, another motion. I move to remove Brent Wallace as PTA chair, said Mrs. Chen, the board's newest member. His actions have divided our community and shown bias against struggling families. Seconded, said another member quickly. Brent's face flushed red. This is ridiculous. All in favor? 5 hands raised. Brent's removal was swift, his protests ignored. Now regarding Ms. Alvarez, I move to close this matter with no action against the teacher, Mrs. Chen said. She showed initiative and compassion. If that's against policy, we need new policies. Seconded. All in favor? Unanimous, even from those who'd looked stern moments before. Grace's knees nearly buckled. Ruth caught her elbow, steadying her. Outside, the crowd spilled into the parking lot. March evening cool and clear. Parents hugged Grace, thanked her, promised to support the mill's reopening. Ethan waited by her car, hands in his pockets. "You were there?" she asked. "Back row. Wouldn't miss it." They walked slowly toward her apartment, 6 blocks of quiet streets. Grace's adrenaline faded, leaving her shaky. "You stood tall in there," Ethan said, "like a soldier. I thought of you. How you lead at the mill." They reached her doorstep, porch light casting soft shadows. "Thank you," Grace said, "for inspiring me to find my courage." Ethan stepped closer. For a moment, the air between them charged with possibility. Grace lifted her face, lips parting slightly. But Ethan pulled back, gentle but decisive. "When the mill opens again," he said softly, "when our town stands tall, when we've proven this works, that's when I'll be ready. When I can offer you something whole, not broken." Grace nodded, understanding even as disappointment flickered. "I'll wait," she said. "You shouldn't have to." "I choose to." Ethan squeezed her hand, then walked back toward the streetlight, his figure straight and sure, despite everything behind and ahead. The morning sun caught the new windows of the mill, throwing patches of light across Main Street where half the town had already gathered. Ethan checked his watch 30 minutes until the ribbon cutting and straightened his collar. The blue button-down shirt, same one that had started everything, was freshly pressed but otherwise unchanged. Every mended seam, every careful stitch remained visible. "Daddy, you could wear the new jacket," Maya suggested, adjusting the heart logo banner she'd painted. "Not today, sweetheart. Today we remember how this started." Ruth arrived in a dress she'd sewn herself, navy cotton with delicate white piping, each stitch a testament to decades of skill. The other seamstresses followed, wearing their own creations, faces bright with pride. "Never thought I'd walk through these doors again," Ruth said, touching the mill's brick entrance. 40 years since they shut us down." Inside, the transformation was complete. Where dust and decay had ruled, now stood gleaming workstations, organized fabric walls, and Maya's heart logo painted boldly above the entrance. The old looms, restored as museum pieces, flanked a modern cutting table. Sewing machines, some donated, some bought with Lena's personal funds, lined the south wall where natural light poured in. The crowd swelled, veterans in their service caps, teenagers who'd learned to hem, mothers pushing strollers, even Brent Wallace lurking at the edges, his former authority deflated but curiosity intact. Lena stepped forward, no longer the polished CEO but something more authentic, in simple slacks and a blazer from the Made Here line. "Before we cut this ribbon," she began, voice carrying without a microphone, "I need to share what we've built. This isn't charity. This isn't a donation. Neighbor Threads Co-op is a worker-owned cooperative." She held up the legal documents. "Every seamstress, every volunteer who commits 20 hours a month becomes a voting owner. Profits, when we have them, get shared. Decisions get made together. Nobody swoops in from outside to tell you what dignity looks like." Ruth's quilting circle exchanged tearful glances. "Ownership. After years of being told their skills were obsolete. I'm investing personal funds," Lena continued, "not as your boss, but as your partner. The structure ensures no single person can sell out or shut down what you've built. This mill belongs to you." Ethan stepped up next, and the crowd quieted. He stood there in his mended shirt, shoulders straight, Maya beaming beside him. 3 months ago, some folks whispered about this shirt. His voice was steady, trained by years of briefing soldiers. Said it showed I couldn't provide, but Ruth taught me something. Broken threads still hold quilts together. This shirt, these men's, they're not about what I lack. They're about what we can fix when we work together. He gestured to the mill. Every beam we raised, every wire we ran, every stitch sewn, it happened because neighbors decided dignity matters more than appearances, because a teacher, his eyes found grace, saw past the surface, because folks who'd been written off proved they still had plenty to give. Maya climbed onto a crate, carefully pinning her logo above the entrance. The stitched hearts surrounding a simple shirt caught the light, and cameras clicked as the town newspaper captured the moment. Grace stepped forward, holding a bright blue folder. "The school board approved something yesterday," she announced. "A new town tradition. Every March 15th, the day this all started at that PTA meeting, will be Same Shirt Day." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "We'll each wear one repeated item," Grace explained. "The same shirt, same dress, same jacket. Not because we have to, but because we choose to. To remember that dignity isn't about having the newest or the best. It's about caring for what we have and for each other." "I'll wear my father's tie," called Mr. Chen from the hardware store. "My mother's apron," added Mrs. Rodriguez. Even Brent, pressed against the back wall, nodded slowly. Mayor Thompson stepped up with oversized scissors. "Let's open this mill properly." Ruth and Ethan held the ribbon together, Maya and Grace flanking them, Lena standing proud beside her sister. The scissors flashed, red silk fell away, and the crowd surged forward. Inside, the seamstresses took their stations, demonstrating techniques. Children traced patterns under careful supervision. Veterans showed teenagers how to use the pressing stations. The coffee corner, run by church volunteers, filled cups as fast as they could brew. Music drifted from the corner where high school kids had set up speakers not too loud, just enough to add lightness. Families toured the facility, marveling at the transformation. The donation area was discreet but dignified. The retail section displayed made-here pieces with clear, fair prices. "Look at this stitching," someone said, examining a blazer. "Better than department store quality." Ethan stood near the entrance, watching it all unfold. 3 months ago he'd sat in that PTA meeting, ashamed of his worn collar. Now children ran past in clothes altered with love, their parents standing taller, and Ruth's seamstresses compared orders from neighboring towns interested in the model. "You did this," Grace said quietly beside him. "We did this. That shirt really did start something. Maybe it just revealed what was already there." Neighbors ready to be neighbors again. The celebration continued as afternoon light slanted through the windows, catching dust motes that danced like celebration confetti, blessing this space where dignity had found its home. That evening, the mill transformed into something from a dream. Ruth's quilting circle had worked through the afternoon, hanging quilts from the rafters, each one a story, a memory, a promise. The patches caught lamplight like stained glass, casting colored shadows across long tables borrowed from the church. "Careful with that potato salad, Mrs." Chen called to her grandson, racing past. "That's my mother's recipe." The feast sprawled across every surface, casseroles and pies, tamales and pierogies, dishes that spoke of where families came from and where they'd landed together. Steam rose from aluminum pans, mingling with laughter and the scrape of chairs being pulled close. Veterans clustered near the coffee station, their voices rising and falling in familiar rhythm. "Remember that supply run in '71? One asked, launching into a story that had the others nodding, filling in details, correcting embellishments. Children wove between tables playing tag, their feet thundering on the old wood floors. Nobody shushed them. The mill was meant for life, for noise, for joy spilling over. Ruth stood near the center, her quilting circle gathered around her like disciples. She raised her weathered hand, and gradually the room quieted. "We used to sing this at shift changes," she said, "back when the mill ran 3 shifts a day. Some of you remember," she began, her voice thin but true. "We shall overcome, we shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Other voices joined, tentative at first, then stronger. The quilting circle harmonized from memory. Veterans added bass notes. Children hummed along, not knowing all the words but feeling the weight of them. Ethan stood near the dessert table, watching light dance across faces he'd come to know these past weeks. The room blurred slightly, not from sadness but from something fuller. Grace stood beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "You okay?" she asked softly. "More than okay?" The hymn continued, voices weaving together like threads in Ruth's quilts. Ethan felt something shift in his chest, a loosening of armor he'd worn so long he'd forgotten its weight. He took Grace's hand. She looked up, surprised. "Come with me a minute?" He led her toward the corner, where twinkle lights clustered thickest, creating a pocket of golden warmth. The hymn continued behind them, muffled but present. "Grace, He stopped, started again. "3 months ago, I was drowning, too proud to reach for help. You saw past that. Saw Maya needed more than I could give alone. Saw that He paused. That I needed saving too. You saved yourself, Ethan. You just needed someone to remind you that you could." "I've been scared," he admitted. "Scared of feeling again, of wanting things, of letting someone in when I couldn't guarantee." "Ethan." She squeezed his hand. "I'm not asking for guarantees." Behind them, the hymn reached its crescendo. He could hear Maya's high voice joining in, slightly off-key but enthusiastic. He pulled Grace closer, one hand settling at her waist, the other cupping her face. The kiss was tender at first, tentative, two people remembering how to trust. Then certainty took over. Years of loneliness, of careful distance, melted in that corner, while lights twinkled above them like stars brought indoors. Daddy's smiling again. Maya's whisper carried from across the room where she stood with Ruth, their hands clasped. Ruth patted the girl's shoulder, her own eyes bright with unshed tears. "About time," Ruth murmured back. When Ethan and Grace finally parted, his eyes were wet. He didn't hide it. Around them, the feast continued, neighbors becoming family, strangers becoming friends. Someone had brought a guitar, and music mixed with conversation. Ethan's voice joined the hymn's final verse, cracking on the high notes but holding steady. "Deep in my heart I do believe we shall overcome someday." The song ended, but its echo lingered. People returned to eating, to talking, to the business of building community, one shared meal at a time. Ethan kept Grace's hand in his as they walked back toward the tables. "Daddy!" Maya ran over, throwing her arms around his waist. "Mrs. Ruth says we can help design the spring line. She wants to teach me French seams." "That's wonderful, sweetheart." Maya looked between her father and Grace, her grin widening. "Are you gonna marry Miss Grace?" "Maya!" Ethan's face flushed. Grace laughed, kneeling to Maya's level. "How about we start with dinner together sometimes? See where things go? Can we have something besides mac and cheese?" "I make pretty good enchiladas," Grace offered. "Deal." As the evening wound down, Ethan helped stack chairs while Grace wrapped leftovers. The meal grew quiet, but it was a satisfied quiet, the kind that comes after good work and good company. The last image of the day hung in the mill's front window. A clothesline stretched across the frame, shirts of every size and color clipped to it. Each bore Maya's stitched heart logo, imperfect, handmade, beautiful. The setting sun caught them just right, turning ordinary fabric into something luminous. A year ago, those shirts might have been sorted by value, by brand, by who could afford what. Now they hung together, no hierarchy, no judgment. Just cloth and thread, and the promise that tomorrow, neighbors would look out for each other. The town that had whispered about a mended collar now stood whole, stitched together by their own hands, stronger at the broken places. If you enjoyed the story, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.